The coining of death metal. The story of Jeff Becerra Possessed will be done with AI narration of his article story for those that are blind and for those truck drivers and bus drivers out there that are away from their home and family so they are able to keep up with their favorite artists. Leave a comment down below what you think of the article and the AI narration. We are stepping up our game for you. Pure Metal of Gods magazine. The coining of death metal started with Possessed writing the song death metal as an anthem for freedom for the younger generation and themselves. This was the ultimate music at the time being created. It was the ultimate extreme, the ultimately fuck you in your face. When thrash metal was losing its edge, a new generation would come and take the mantle, and it started with Possessed and the very first demo of death metal. Ruling your cities, controlling your towns, and trapped in your worst nightmare, piercing your ears with a horrible sound, casting my elusive stare. Lucifer laughs, his needs are fulfilled, the flames are now burning, hot bodies are burning, the people are killed, torture. The reason we fought death metal. Jeff Becerra in a previous interview stated that it was a calculated risk to be the most satanic and the fastest, heaviest band on the planet. From the creation of the demo death metal, leading to the very first album Seven Churches, the group started to experiment with new sounds and vastly grew as musicians in such albums as Seven Churches. Death metal would be coming to age, heavier and faster music in general. People were getting bored with thrash metal. Then the tragic incident of Jeff Becerra was shot. There's no telling at any time where Possessed could have been, and where they could have led the death metal community into. Unfortunately, Jeff Becerra was dealing with his medical issues and the group disbanded. Larry left to join Blind Illusion, which turned into Primus. And Mike Terrau and Mike Seuss no longer wanted to tour and play in a metal band. They wanted to go back to normal life. Touring in a satanic death metal band is not for everybody. It's a lot of work and you have to make it priority one. For me and Larry, I would say it was a no-brainer because we had nothing else but for the mics. They had to decide whether to play death metal or do what their families wanted them to do. Mike's father had a very successful landscaping business, and he was expecting his son to take the reins. Pure Metal of Gods. Jeff dealing with his medical and rehab. I asked Jeff a very simple question: would it have been possible to reform Possessed after everything he was going through in rehabilitation, and what point would he decide to get back on stage, and how was the feeling for you? Jeff Becerra: actually, I couldn't. I had 5 years of extremely dark times. I lived alone and essentially tried to kill myself with drugs and alcohol. I had PTSD. Eventually, I left a sign on the door of my house that said, "Gone to rehab, everything is free inside." Jeff Becerra: after a 47-day stint in rehab, I went to college. When you are in those dark and throes of addiction, it's like being a man dying of thirst in the desert. You're not thinking about poetry and music and writing lyrics. You're thinking about water. College gave me back my self-confidence and will to live. I'm in the same honor society as President Clinton, Nobel laureates, and many other famous people. In college, I got all into the civil rights and the labor movement. I majored in labor studies with a minor in social science, which is essentially studying healthcare in its various forms and its financial institutions, restructuring, etc. I wanted to get educated because attending college was something that I'd always figured I needed to conquer. It's not good to live with fear. Also, from my personal viewpoint, and I'm just speaking for myself alone, I'm not saying this for everybody, but I didn't want to wake up in my 50s and have only played in a satanic death metal band. I also really wanted to have children and a family. So I had a couple of kids in a very nice and lengthy marriage, and then my wife and I decided to call it quits. This created the perfect opportunity to reform Possessed. Jeff Becerra: keep in mind that Possessed had only done one European tour, and we've never done any of these gigantic festivals that we now see in Europe and America. Just the opposite. Initially we were barely out of the garage. We were a club band, so when I came back and played my first giant European festival, which was Wacken 07, I believe, it was really overwhelming because up until that point, I didn't know if my being in a wheelchair would fly. Things are really changing because I honestly don't think that I would have been accepted back in the day being in a wheelchair. So whenever I came out on the stage at Wacken and saw tears in the eyes of grown people, and how excited and happy it made people, it was very emotional, and I had to really hold back from getting overly emotional myself. The old Possessed reacted thousands of people in order to get our fan base. These days we are reaching millions of people, so it's very different. Although, we are still very much an underground band. We still play small club shows all the time, and when we do play big venues, bands like Slipknot and Pantera make our audience look tiny. This has always been the nature of Possessed. People either love us or hate us, and that's the best way for me, because if everybody loved Possessed, I don't think I'd be doing my job. Pure Metal of Gods. Jeff: last question, what advice would you give to someone going through something similar? That's a hard one. I guess I would say just keep moving forward. It's okay to stumble, but when you get up, keep looking forward. Then when you're done with that, get up and keep on going. If I can do it, so can they. Nothing is impossible.